Good evening, everybody. I hope those who cannot join us right now will have a chance to listen to this lecture in record on our website. I'm Victoria Arakilova, Associate Editor of Iran and the Caucasus, and we continue our series of lectures dedicated to the 25th anniversary of our journal, Iran and the Caucasus. Today, we are privileged to listen to Professor Antonio Panaino, University of Bologna and Department of Cultural Heritage at Ravenna, who will speak on the fascinating subject, Apocalypticism and Apokatastasis in the Zoroastrian Eschatology, a neglected difference. Thank you very much, Professor Panaino, for joining our project. But before we start our lecture, I have to just in few words say that today we received a very sad news from Jerusalem. Our good friend and colleague, a great scholar of Iranian studies, Shaul Shaket, passed away, and I'm expressing my deep condolence to his family, his friends, and to all my colleagues. For each of us, it's a really big loss. Professor Panaino, thank you very much. I'm giving you the floor. We can start now.
Okay, I thank you, all of you, in particular Garnick and Victoria, who invited me. I am very proud to be member of the editorial board of Iran and the Caucasus. I like the work you have done and you are doing. And I feel to be a good friend and supporter of the Armenian culture and of the Armenian society. For this reason, also my department has taken various cooperative actions in Armenia in the last year. And probably, as you know, my university just gave 2 weeks ago a special seal to the Armenian president of the Republic. So this just to emphasize or to confirm the good relation with Armenia and the University of Bologna. And I hope in future to improve and to enforce this cooperative action. I would like also to say just a few words in memory of Shaul Shaket. Here, if you can see my page, very briefly, I was able to collect a recent photograph of Shaul and the cover page of some of his very many books, Aramaic Bowls, Spells. Shaul was a great scholar also in Aramaic, and you know the pertinence, the relevance of Aramaic for the Iranian culture. He was was a specialist of Zoroastrian studies, and his book Dualism in Transformation was a very important contribution to the debate. And I have to mention, again, by Shaul Shaket, a collection of his main studies about Zoroastrianism and early Islamic traditions from Zoroastrian Iran to Islam. Shaul Shaket was born in Hungary, so he was from an Hungarian Jewish family, born in Debrecen in 1933. He moved to the not yet existing state of Israel, to Palestine, and started to continue his interest in antiquity. He was able to join the University of London, where he was one of the last pupils of Walter Bruno Henning. He had also this opportunity because, and in fact his dissertation, his PhD dissertation was discussed with Henning because he studied at the beginning with Polowski and Professor Polowski, who escaped from Berlin to Jerusalem and who became professor in Jerusalem. was in parental relations with Henning, because Maria Polotsky was the wife of Henning. And so some people don't know these these stories in the background, but Polotsky was in condition literally to phone to Henning and to ask Henning to take this young and good scholar from Israel in London. So under the supervision of Henning, the young Shaul Shaked started his main research in the Denkard, in particular in the Pahlavi Sasanian, post-Sasanian theological tradition. And from that period, he started an enormous amount of research. He was also very important in his contributions in the field of magic, of ancient magic, because of the study of the magic balls. And you know, the field of magic is inevitably a comparative field, because you have texts in Hebrew, in Aramaic, in Pahlavi, then in Arabic, in Mandaean, and so on. So this difficult subject was a good challenge for a man who spoke and who knew very many modern and ancient languages. I would also, just to conclude this brief memory of his person, to say that he was not only a very good scholar, but also a very nice and a fantastic person as a man, I have to say. So honestly, we will miss him for many reasons. Of course, for his intelligence, for his ability in the field, and for his insight, but also for his generosity and for his human sympathy. Sometimes this is not so. It is not so common. We can find a good scholar, but not exactly a thrilling person. And when you can see a mixture of all these good things, we can say we have been happy to have had the opportunity to know him, to share his friendship. So let me conclude with these words in his great memory. In any case, you know, the person really never die, in the sense that thanks to his words, to his books, to what we can still do, continuing his researches, he will remain in his contribution, and until his work, he will be standing in the field and again with us. So Garnik, if you want to add a few things, perhaps.
There's nothing. You said everything about Shaul. Yes, I knew him.
Okay, so at this point, I think I may start this discussion or reflection about a provocative subject, because we speak of eschatology. We speak of apokatastasis, or mostly of apocalyptics, but sometimes we do not really think about the implication, the meaning of the terminology we adopt. Sometimes we can make, if not confusion, we can just enter, for instance, in a lot of polemics, of fights with other colleagues, just because same things, but we do not use the same terminology, or we don't reflect on the theological implications of the terminology we are using. Look, this is a serious problem, because as Iranologists, frequently we adopt Christian terminology, but according to the Christian orientation of the scholars or the non-Christian orientation of the scholars, the same word can assume different meanings. And instead of being a way of clarification, a form of clarification, we really enter into a great confusion. So I will start, if you can see my presentation. I will start from the term eschatology, which is, of course, is from Greek eschatos, meaning last. So when we use the term eschatology with regard to Iran, the Zoroastrian tradition, or even the Vedic one for old India, we use we can say a modern term, because eschatology entered into the English lexicon in the 19th century, but its meaning is not dramatic, is not problematic. This is the study of the last phase of human history, or of the last phase of a world. So we can, without difficulties, use this term. This is not a problem in itself. But when we assume a priori that the eschatology implies the immortality of the soul, well, at this point we have to be much more prudent, because in the Vedic world, as well as in some occasions in the Iranian tradition, amarta, so immortal, does not mean immortal as we would like to assume. So living for the eternity. In many places, it is just a term referring to a very long, insane life of 100 years or more. So it is not that really, and not in every place, immortality in the sense of the eternal life. So this is a Zoroastrian idea, the immortal life in the post-mortem, in the afterlife, but it is not so common. For instance, in the Vedic or in the Christian tradition, we can find, of course, it. But we have to be careful, because in ancient sources we have to distinguish where immortal means not dying or having a very long life on the earth, because after there is a dark existence for everybody. Think about, for instance, the early Greek situation when Achilles, when the most important Greek hero of the Iliad, in the afterlife, in a very dark dimension, meets with Ulysses, with Odysseus, and Achilles says, "I would like to be the most poor of my servants instead of being the king of Hades, the king of this dark realm, of this dark place where all of the Greeks and the other people are going to spend their time." So the idea that we have, in any case, an immortal life, or a life into a dimension of spiritual privilege, is something which was not so common, even in the early Jewish tradition, where we find the Sheol. The Sheol is a place where which is dark, which is cold, and it is difficult to say that this was a kind of paradise or a place of privilege. So, but we have to observe that in the Indo-Iranian world, in the Vedas and in the Avesta, we can find some points supporting the presence or the development of an idea of afterlife, where also the concept of retribution in the afterlife is present, and also the idea that you can have an immortal life. In this case, we are compelled to distinguish between individual eschatology and collective eschatology, because in many traditions, you have two dramatic events, one concerning the individual destiny, what happens to one person when he or she dies, and what it will happen to the whole of humanity. Also, this is not the same. It can be connected, but it is not systematically and always the same. So in the Iranian world, in the Mazdian framework, we have a meeting of the Urvan, which is the masculine soul, and the Daena, which is the spiritual, the animical double, which is the feminine soul. So we have a meeting of the two parts in a sort of hierogamy of ritual and symbolic marriage, in which the two sides are reunified again. And this is one kind of event which concern every human being. In this sense, I would like to attract your attention on the fact that the Urvan is not a man meeting a woman, the Daena, but Urvan and Daena are two parts of a complex, of a spiritual complex. So women have the Urvan and women have the Daena too. So we have to get out of a sort of Islamic perspective in which the Urvan is the young hero going to meet his Uri. No, here Urvan and Daena were two aspects of the same person. In fact, the Daena corresponds in her appearance to the thoughts, the words, the action of the same person. If this person was a man, okay, but the same was true also for women. Of course, you can ask me, but is this a normal perspective from a female point of view? No, of course. The persons, the priests who imagine this kind of dynamics of the reconstruction in the afterlife of the primordial soul, of course, were men. So the idea that the real representation of your correctness in life is a beautiful lady is a kind of vision developed by men. But in any case, despite this fact, we have two parts of the soul. Another important element concerning the destiny of the soul is the destiny in front of the Chinvat bridge. We have a bridge already mentioned in Old Avestan, in the Gathas. I mentioned 3 places in which we can find this bridge, the Chinvat bridge, or Chinvat Prtu in Avestan. And in front of this bridge, the Urvan and the Daena together have to pass if they have been judged in a good way, or they fall down if their life has been that of sinners. So also in this case, we have individual eschatology. Individual eschatology is clearly present in Old Avestan. So we can say that in the Old Avestan, we have the idea of immortality of the soul. We have the idea that the spiritual dimension of human beings is given with an Urvan and with a Daena. There is the Chinvat bridge, and as we will see, the destiny in the afterlife is eternal, in the good sense or in the bad sense. So one person can go to hell and he will remain, he or she will remain there forever, or he can go to paradise, where he or she will stay forever. There is no reference to a sort of purgatory, which appears only in later Avestan text, and then which will be present in resources. But we have also in Avesta a collective eschatology. The collective eschatology is clear only in young Avestan sources. In old Avestan sources, unfortunately, we do not have any description of the destiny of the whole humanity. Some scholars are trying to say that in old Avestan we have examples of the orderly of a fire, and that this will concern humanity. But really, the philological analysis of the very, very few places which could be analyzed in that way are desperate. So really, I don't believe in this. And recently, Jean Kellens has used words much more negative than mine. So I prudently had to remark that collective eschatology is not described in the old Avestan sources. Of course, there is an individual eschatology, so there is an idea of the afterlife, there is an idea of immortality, there is the presence of Yima, who is the first civilizing hero of humanity, but this person in the Gathas has a certain negative presentation. But this means that we have a basis for the development of a collective eschatology. But which kind of collective eschatology has to be clarified, and this is clearly present with the idea of a final resurrection of the dead, and with the role of the three posthumous sons of Zoroaster. But this is young Avestan. Of course, the explanation of these events is more clear from the Bundahishn, where we find three sons, which in Avestan are named Ukshat Erta, Ukshat Nemach, and the third is Astuat Ereta. But they will manifest themselves at the end of the last 3 millennia before the end of the world. The last, Asya, who is the Saoshant, so the hero who will resurrect all humanity, who will be the protagonist of a complete transformation of the world, is already explicitly mentioned in the Zamiad Yasht. So in one of the most ancient texts of a young Avestan, and he is the protagonist of an action of resurrection as the last of the three sons of Zoroaster. So we can, without difficulties, say that in the Mazdian tradition, in the Achaemenid period, if not earlier, the Zoroastrians had developed an idea of the final resurrection of the dead. It is not clear if all humanity will be resurrected, and it is never established, no text says this, that the persons who were sent to hell will be forgiven. Apparently, from what we can deduce from the text, the persons in the hell will remain there with no hope. We have other references to the resurrection of the dead concerning the Iranian world in Greek sources, for instance, in Theopompus, also in Plutarch, who quotes Theopompus again. And this is also another interesting element, because we can say, well, we have not just a void between the Avestan texts and the Pahlavi sources. You know, most of the Pahlavi sources are very late, after the Islamic conquest of Iran. But in the middle, we have some Greek sources which make references to eschatological doctrines in Iran. We can mention also, just to recall that the resurrection is not for all the dead, mentioning Yasna 46:11, where it is said that the Karapans and the Kawis, so categories of person normally hostile against Zoroaster, hitched a man with evil powers and action in order to destroy his existence. This is a literal translation, but the text says that the Urvan and the Daena of this persons will make furious these Karapans and Kawis, and also the person which have been ruined by them, when they arrive in the place where there is the Chimvat bridge. And they will be guests of the house of the lie, Drujo Demanes, of the hell, for the whole eternity. Yahweh whispers. Guests. So, from what we can deduce from the old Iranian text, the old Avestan text, there is no reason to believe that the resurrection was imagined for the whole humanity, or that the whole humanity would have been saved. Also, we have to insist on one fact. We do not know if in the earliest Iranian periods, the Aryan tribes had developed an idea of humanity in the sense we would like to use it today. So did they develop a concern about the Babylonians or people for Central Asia, Chinese, and so on? We do not know. Probably when they speak of the afterlife, when they consider a dimension in paradise or in the hell, their horizon concern only their own ethnocultural links. So I am not so sure. I want to be prudent, but I must say I'm not sure that an idea of universal humanity with the concept of equality and tolerance as we imagine could have been attributed to them. In any case, the Zoroastrian vision of the afterlife, as we know from the Young Avesta, and in Young Avesta, we have seen that the three sons, the posthumous sons of Zoroaster, will be protagonists of an eschatological myth in which the last one, the Saoshant par excellence, will start the resurrection of the whole humanity with the doubt I mentioned before. In the Pahlavi text, this will be much more clear. So in the Sasanian and post-Sasanian times, a universal dimension, a cosmic dimension was much more clear, but this was another kind of society, was a mondialized society with completely different intercultural or multicultural relations. So it would have been very difficult also for the most conservative Zoroastrian to think about only to his own cultural and ethno-linguistic dimension. The world was a little bit smaller and so also the others were part of a panorama of a vision. But in the Young Avesta, we have some new ideas. One in particular is the millennialism. So the fact that we have a history of humanity divided in two big periods of 6,000 years, and we find references to millennia in a very explicit way. There is a millennium of Yima. There are periods in which the Saoshant will appear. So the doctrine of the Saoshant and of the sons of Zoroaster is part of a millennial cosmic vision of the time. And also we can find in the Fravardim Yasht the idea that Ahriman, from outside of the cosmic dimension created by Ahura Mazda, will attack the sky, will pierce the sky from the bottom, because we have to remember that north from an Iranian perspective is down, and Ahriman, according to the late, down in the darkness. So when he is attacking the creation, he jumps from the bottom, piercing the creation. But after he had broken the heaven, entering the creation, he will be blocked and closed inside as into a trap. For this reason, Ahriman will not be able to escape from the creation. He is prisoner inside. No text says that Ahura Mazda is inside. We know that Ahura Mazda is outside, and that the Yazatas, the Zoroastrian minor divinities, can get into or get out of the creation and into or out of the limited time. This is the superiority of Ahura Mazda. Ahura Mazda has created the limited time, has created the world, but he can control the battle. He is not inside the field, he's outside the field, controlling what will happen into history. So we can find these clearly new ideas, millennialism, and the idea that the cosmos is has been put in motion, and the Fravashis work in order to pull the heaven around, so that the demons cannot escape from the creation. So we have to see the imagine of the resurrection within this developed system, which in the Pahlavi sources, which are later, has been transformed and theologically more, how I could say, more intelligently, or more in a much more fine way elaborated, according to a theological philosophical vision. What happens, in fact? We know that the time is limited and cannot be extended or blocked. We have to be very careful on this subject. To limit, to block the time, to extend time would be a demonic action. Is against the interest of Ahura Mazda, of Ormazd, to extend the time, because the time is fixed and the arrows of the clock mark the final destiny of Ahriman. So, for instance, in the Den card, it is said that a Druj, so a demoness, tries at the end of every millennium to block the sun for 10 days, the first time, for 20 days, the second time, for 30 days, when the Saoshant will appear. Some texts interpret this phenomena in a positive way, But the Descartes is very strict, says that this is a demonic action, because to block the sun in the heaven means to slow down the regular evolution of time. And this was tried by Ahriman and the demoness Drudge in order to avoid the inevitable destiny of the end of time, and with the end of time, the end of their existence, so of the antagonism. This is one element we have to consider. Second, we have the resurrection of the dead. We have the idea that the mountains will be melted. We have the idea that all the world will be made without peaks of mountains. It will be flat. Bruce Lincoln has studied in a very intelligent way this doctrine, emphasizing the egalitarian vision of this symbolism. But we have also to consider that the mountains are full of metals, and these metals are done with the same matter of the heavens. So a river of molten metals will destroy the hell and will purify all the sinners who are in the hell. The celestial dragon Goatsir will fall down from the heaven, and he will be burnt completely and destroyed into the river of molten metal. So we have an image of a molten metal river, which is interesting, but not original. Where can we find another parallel? Well, the idea of a river of fire is present since the late third millennium BC in Egypt, where we have a lake in which the souls are burnt with the bodies. So people are completely destroyed into this lake of fire. Then we have this image in Greece, in Homer and in Plato, the Periplegeton, which is a river made of fire, where the people who kill the parents are burned. The idea is developed in the Gnostic, Jewish, and Christian tradition, and then it is expanded not only in the Manichaean sources, where we have Chinese references from Manichaean text to this river of fire, but mostly into a Christian theological tradition, which is called Apokatastasis, and which belongs to two fathers of the church, Clemens Alexandrinus and Origen. So what is the main theological innovation suggested by these scholars? Their idea is, first, God is good and cannot abandon the humanity to the devil. So the sinners will be forgiven at the end, because every person has a little light of goodness, which will at the end save him. First. Second, they will be purified thanks to a river of fire. This river of fire probably will be transformed into a river of molten metals, because fire is sacred. So, you know, fire cannot stay into the hell. When you read Zoroastrian texts like the Ardavi Raznamag, you cannot find fire into the hell, but ice, for instance, in particular around Ahriman. So we have an adaptation using the concept of a metal, of a molten metal, which in any case was part of the rituals of the ordeal in the ancient Indo-Iranian framework. Then we have already in the Apocalypsis of John an idea which concerns the melting of Satan. Satan, or Shaitan, sorry, I will find the place. This is the Apocalypsis Johannes 20. I saw an angel coming down of heaven, having the key of the abyss and a great chain in his hand. He says the dragon, the old serpent, which is the devil and Satan, who deceived the whole inhabited earth, and bound him for 1,000 years, and cast him into the abyss, and shut it, and sealed it over him, that he should deceive the nation no more. Okay, so in the Pahlavi text, the snake dragon God's ear will fall through the firmament from the tip of the moon to the earth, and the earth will feel as much pain as an Eve whose fleece is torn off by a wolf. But attention, God's ear will be destroyed. Then the fire and the divine Herman will melt the metal of the mountains and hills, which will lay on the earth like a river. Every person will pass through that molten metal, and rictus, it will feel like walking through warm milk, while the wicked, it will feel like walking through molten metal in the material world. So here we have a vision of the end of the world in which all humanity is saved. So we can speak of Apokatastasis here, from the Greek Apokatastasis, final restoration. So we have here a very clear theological idea. Of course, the end of the world is always dramatic, but there is no fear. So there is no panic. There is a final battle. All humanity is resurrected. All humanity is fighting against the demons. The demons get crazy. They start to kill each other. Even Ahriman, at the end, asks for the help of Ormazd. But at this point, humanity, thanks to a big sacrifice celebrated by Ormazd with the Ameshaspentas or the Amachraspandan, will be celebrated. This sacrifice will be performed in the heaven. On the earth, 7 priests will celebrate the same sacrifice. The 2 levels will join in the same dimension, and this sacrifice will transform the world. The limited time will be dissolved, will be finished, and all the humanity with Ormazd and the Yazads will pass into the eternal time, in a dimension of transformation, of a spiritual transformation, of beatification of all the people. So no human being will be left to the darkness of the hell, and no hell will survive. The hell will be destroyed. Oh, this doctrine, from the theological point, was clearly developed by Origen and his school. Origen and his school had, thanks to the Syriac Church of the East, and then to the Persian Christian Wafisites, had a certain success, because Theodore of Mopsuestia, who was the most important theological leader of the Persian Christian Church, was not in good term with the theology of Origen for other reasons, but he accepted the doctrine of the Apokatastasis. So we have a direct diffusion of this doctrine into the Iranian world. But of course, it took time for this doctrine to develop and to be transformed by the Zoroastrian into something that they could consider as their own. And I will speak in the last part of my of my talk of this process. So when we continuously hear references to the Apocalypticism, and so people continuously say that the Mazdian afterlife, the Mazdian eschatology is full of apocalyptic phenomena. Well, we have to remark the apocalypsis in Iran occurs only in the millennium of Zoroaster. So as the Zandi Wachman Yazn 1611 shows, there are a lot of catastrophic events, all these events connected clearly with historical events. So we have predictions, but they have been formulated after the events were had happened. So, and we have the attestation of a doctrine in which there is a tree with branches, each one associated with a metal, and these branches are connected with decaying eras. So we have a first period, an era of gold with Zardosht and Vistaspa. We have an era of silver with Ardashir, the Kayanian. And we have an era of steel with the King Khosrav. Then we have an era of mixed iron with the evil rule of the demon Heshv. The same idea is developed in a block of 7 epochs, of 7 eras, Haft Avam, gold, silver, copper, brass, lead, steel, mixed iron. And a lot of discussions started in the scholarly debate if this idea was early Iranian and if this idea played an influence on the apocalyptics of the Jewish and the Christian sources. But it is clear that this doctrine is not a genuine doctrine in Iran, because according to this idea, in one case with King Vistaspa and Zoroaster, who is his contemporary, or in the idea of the 4 ages in which we have Zardosht with the period of gold, we have a very negative vision of the history of the world. So we have Zoroaster, who is at the beginning of a series of defeats, a series of worsening periods. This has nothing to do with the optimistic attitude of Zoroastrianism that we observe in the Young Avesta. In the Young Avesta, we have Zoroaster, and then we have his 3 posthumous sons. And we know that every one of his posthumous sons will appear 1 millennium after the other. So the idea is a march of glory against the demons, against the Daivas, against Angra Mainyu. Why we should postulate that this tradition, which is the same we have in the Christian or in some Jewish sources, is Iranian or Proto-Iranian and was transferred into the Jewish Christian world. In my opinion, as some other scholars also think, this is a Jewish Christian idea which started to be elaborated after the collapse of the Achaemenid Empire. So when the Jewish were suffered a lot, as the Persians suffered a lot with the presence of other Western dynasties, and then they started a kind of literature which is called an apocalyptic literature. This tradition was enlarged, and again, with the collapse of the Sasanian state, of the Sasanian empire, these doctrines were emphasized again, and they found their way into the future events of the Zoroastrian community. But look, all these apocalyptic events, negative events, take place into the last part of the millennium of Zoroaster. There are not apocalyptic events into the last millennium of the Saoshant. So when we have a completely different theological framework. So the idea of the Apokatastasis, the idea of the final restoration. I want also to say, and then I will conclude my remarks of today, is that an idea of a universal restoration, of a universal act of forgiveness to the whole humanity is a relatively modern idea, because this kind of theology is very fine, is very sophisticated. It starts not only from an idea of extreme tolerance. It has a cosmologic basis. So the idea is that God is in all the parts of the universe. So if God wins, there is no place of the universe in which he can rule. This means that there is no place in which a kind of hell with a sort of shaitan or Satan or Ahriman can survive. In fact, Origen supposed that Satan had the opportunity to ask pardon, to surrender and to convert again. So this is the hope, the extreme hope of the Christian apokatastatic tradition. The idea that even the devil in person could convert and could surrender. This will be the total victory. But in the Zoroastrian version, we have the idea that no hell can survive. Why? Because if you have an hell, you will have in the eternity a part of the universe in which Ahriman will continue to rule and in which sufferance could endure forever. This is not acceptable from a theological point of view. Consider that in the Sasanian period, some doctrinal ethical ideas coming from the Ethica Nicomachea of Aristotle were widespread. So the idea of the paiman, the intermediate point of equilibrium, the idea of the right mean, the idea that you have not to, for instance, punish a person more of a kind of sin he has committed. So an idea of a balance between sins and punishments. So in many Zoroastrian texts, in the Denkard, in the Shkangumanigi Vichar, for instance, the Zoroastrians insist on the fact that the kindness, the goodness of our master is so great that he cannot punish persons who committed sins into the limited time to a punishment which will endure forever and ever into the eternity. When these ideas started, it is difficult to say. It's probably we can suppose that still in the Sasanian period, the doctrine of the eternal hell was the leading one. But in my opinion, when in Byzantium, Origen was condemned twice by Justinian, this punishment, this theological expulsion from the church had also political implication and social implication, in which normally the heretics following the Apokatastasis were condemned with the Manichaeans. But in the later sources of the 6th, 7th century, the Manichaeans can be easily associated with the Mazdakites living into the West, so in the Byzantine framework. So my idea is that with the Mazdakite revolt and with the social movements insisting on equality, on tolerance, on the distribution of richness in the society, also the problem of the access to an eternal life and hope. So the idea of hope, the possibility to hope for a future into a paradise, started to become significant. And when the Sasanians lost the power, the Zoroastrian Church was no more responsible of the control of the society. And in this way, also in order to save people inside the Zoroastrian religion, a more optimist, a more tolerant representation of the afterlife was proposed, was offered. So we will have good social reason and theological evidences, because the image we have of the afterlife and of the beatification of the whole humanity can find a direct correspondence only within the framework of a very important Christian tradition, which was not robbed. So I conclude with this remark. I do not think that the Zoroastrians, the theologians of the Zoroastrian Church, sitting as myself here today in front of a table, started to cut ideas from the Christian theology. But we have to imagine that the connection between the Christian Church and the Zoroastrian clubs were very, very important and very strong since the 4th, 5th century. We have to remember the role of Christian philosophers and intellectuals into the Sasanian court, the relations of important Christian authorities in discussing high-level problems with Khosraw Anushirvan and his descendants. So the level of circulations of the idea was very, very high and at the same time very deep. So my idea is that these doctrines entered a new perspective of the Zoroastrian theology because they appeared naturally fitting for the Zoroastrian optimism. Zoroastrianism started with an optimistic vision, and this idea were developed following that trend. Concerning the millennium of Zoroaster, so the period after the defeat by the Islamic armies and the winners of the Arabic tribes, of course, in that case, we observe the presence of apocalyptic doctrines. But we have to do really with two different conceptual and theological blocks. So for this reason, normally colleagues, scholars have emphasized the apocalyptic dimension, and frequently we use the term apocalyptic when there is no need, there is no reason to use it. So I desire to insist on the dimension of the Apokatastasis, on which I recently wrote a a short book for the Academy of Vienna, for the Institute of Iranistic. So if you are interested, of course, I can send you some articles of mine concerning this problem, but you can find a synthesis in, let me say, these books, which appeared. I sent the cover page also to Victoria, so I cannot send the PDF of the book, you know, or I will be suited by the Academy. but this is the synthesis of my research on this matter. So, thank you, and I am at your disposal for questions and discussions.
Thank you very much. It was really a brainstorming, dramatic subject to discuss, I would say. I'm sure there are questions. Please, colleagues, or comments. Yes, please.
Just one question. Thank you, Antonio, for this fascinating talk and your insight into this problem. Just one question. So you said that that amarta means not always immortality in the strict sense of the word. It means it's a completely conventional one in old Iranian tradition, or what, or on Zoroastrian.
But it means non-mortality. Amarta.
Yes, amarta.
Theology is clear, but the problem is what is immortal. So, in the perspective of a man of the first millennium BC in Central Asia, what does it mean to be immortal? Does it mean to be immortal as Indra, as Varuna, or does it mean not dying? For instance, when we observe a couple of the Mahraspandan, Amartat and Aurvatat, why they are so close together? Aurvatat, like Sarvatat, Sarva is the integrity of the body. So you are sane because you are in an integrated. So exactly as the psychotic, the schizophrenic feels to be cut in pieces. You know, when you read the manual of psychiatry, a person who has a serious psychiatric problem, the schizophrenic, feels to have a hand just moving into the room. So the idea to be haurvatat or sarvatat, to be perfectly consistent and compact all together and immortal. But immortal in some cases is not immortal like God, is not dying.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And one another also.
A very famous scholar, a Vedic scholar, Bodevitz.
Yes, I know. Bodevitz, Theologist,
on this concept. The problem is to distinguish when Amarta is really immortal as a god, so forever, and the concept of eternity is clear, or when it is just mean I am here safe, sane, not dying.
So I am in integrated state. So to being in integrated state, it means
and not dying.
Thank you, Antonio. And the next one is the concept of Urvan and Diana as an integral notion. You said. So I couldn't properly understand. Can you explain it once more?
Normally, I saw this with my students. Generally, when we present the text of the Ad hoc Nask, for instance, so we have the Urvan sitting close to the head of the dead, and then he jumps up and moves into the direction of the Daena. All my students, and generally the colleagues, think that he is the man who is going toward a woman. So, and the question is, what happens to ladies? This is the normal question, but the question is wrong, because the Urvan is not the personification of a man who died before. Is the male component of a larger animical complex.
Yeah.
So we know from the text that women had fravashis. Women had the Urvan. These are mentioned also in the Old Western text. And frequently, normally the Diana of the ladies is not mentioned, but for a sort of taboo. Not because they have no soul, no Diana. It is clear that they must have a Diana. In the Islamic world, the idea of a Diana has been transformed into an Uri. But in that case, the Uri belong only to men. But you know also that the most sophisticated Islamic theologians do not like this explanation. It's embarrassing because and in reality, in the Zoroastrian tradition, this was not the doctrine, because Urvan and Diana are two aspects of the bigger soul. And they join together and reconstruct the unity of a personality.
Yeah, thank you. And but it's interesting, Antonio, that in the later traditions, later Middle Iranian and also in Iranian tradition, Urvan became the only term for soul in Persian and other Iranian dialects. Yeah,
but this soul,
but not Diana became completely different thing.
Yeah. This is also the term Diana is a problem, because there is a debate if the deen of Arabic is connected or not. There are two contrasting, two opposite doctrines on this. In any case, the Diana is very intriguing. If you think also about the event of Yima in the Videvdat, you know that at the beginning of the second chapter of the Videvdat, the Diana is shown by Ahura Mazda to Yima, and Yima says, "No, I don't want." So many scholars interpret. All the scholars interpret this event as the refusal of the Diana as religion. But I think it is impossible for very simple reasons. Ahura Mazda is not, he is good, but he's not very kind. So if you refuse his religion and in front of him say, "No, I don't want your religion," you will be killed immediately as a follower of a demon. So is it possible that Ahura Mazda hears this poor man? You have to imagine the big Ahura Mazda with the barb, with the sunny rise around his head, and a poor pastor like Yima, a miserable human being in front of the highest God of the world, of the universe, and says, "No, I don't like your religion. Take for yourself this, because I continue the worship of the Devas." And at this point, Ahura Mazda gives him two magic weapons, a baston or something with which he can multiply the earth. In my opinion, this was a kind of initiatic challenge. So he offered the Diana as the double of Yima, asking him, "Do you want this most beautiful lady who is the most beautiful of the universe? Because she is a Huiri, so he is also looking like me in a female way." So the female aspect of God, unimaginable. So, and he says, "No, I am not created for this." So he is saying, "I have another duty." So he refuses something beautiful, not because he says, "No, I don't like your religion." And I think we, the modern scholars, discussed this myth according to a Jewish perspective. So like Moses in front of the tables of the law. But it would be ridiculous. So could we imagine Moses in front of Yahweh saying, no, I don't like your law. I prefer the laws of the Hittites. He is completely, and in fact, in the Videbdab too, there is no accusation against Yima. Yima can develop the earth 3 times. Then the demons arrive with the winters. And he and Ahura Mazda together invite gods and people to a big meeting. And then they dig the Vara. And 1/3 of humanity can be saved there. Do you offer this to a follower of the demons? I think it is a very embarrassing explanation. Also because in many places in the Young Avesta, for instance in the Fravardim Yashta, where you can read, we worship the Fravashi of Yima. Fravashim Yima he Yazamaide. So is it possible that you worship the Fravashi of a person who refused the good religion? So the Diana is more intriguing as a subject. And we have also to consider that in the Avesta, the twin sister of Yima is never mentioned. And my idea is that the Diana plays the role of the twin sister of the first civilizing hero in that place.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you very much. Any more questions? I think Darius Borboris is saying something, but I'm afraid your microphone is off. We cannot hear you. Darius, we cannot hear you. I think your microphone is off.
You have to click on the microphone.
Yeah. I think he's looking for it. It's on the bottom of your page, where you can see several signs, and it's the first from the left.
It's the first icon.
Yeah, the first.
The first icon with the image of a microphone. You have to click on it.
Did you find it, Darius? No, it's
Darius. Darius is a great specialist of everything, especially of computer things. So it's amazing.
It's on the bottom of your page. You see a number of icons, and this is the first from the left. Just click on it.
No.
And well, maybe while Darius is looking for this, maybe are there any questions or comments? And Darius will join as soon as he solves this problem with the microphone.
Sorry, I found
it's okay.
it.
Oh, wonderful.
There are so many pictures of microphones on my computer that I didn't know which one to press.
Okay.
It's the same theme on your computer, multiplying the...
Yes. Well, first of all, I would like to express my pleasure to see Professor Panaino. My first encounter with him, this has nothing to do with this, but as some living history anyway, it's good to have always in these sessions. When I sent a manuscript of my book, this Dictionary of Reduplication to Ehsania Shater. This matter is some 20 25 years ago, maybe. A son wrote to me and said, send a copy to Panaino. Anyway, I sent a copy to him, and he was very kind, and he had a look at it, and he said his exact words were, it seems to me an important and useful work. So, I thanked him at the time, but I would like to thank him again.
It's a pleasure. You know, it was the truth. And as always, you are doing important and useful works, because it's a pleasure for me to see you for the first time.
Yes. And now to come to the actual questions, I would like to ask the concept of these three words. I would like to know, in fact, in your opinion, the concept of the apocalyptic concept and the offshoots of it, which in some way or the other has existed in human mind. When did it really start? Did it start with Zoroastrianism or before, or paganism, and so on and so forth?
Well, my idea is that the strictly apocalyptic doctrine, so the idea that the earthquakes, tempests, hurricanes will come, or barbarians from outside will start to kill the people, the king will die, and so on. All these ideas are not strictly part of the Zoroastrian tradition in connection with the end of the world. Even in the place we mentioned before, so the idea of the arrival of a winter in the Videvdad. The winter is coming, but Ormazd immediately helps Yima to build up a fortification. So Zoroastrianism has this dialectic compensation. There is a good action and the reaction of evil. And then again, a good action which will defeat the reaction of evil, and so on. So, again in the Videvdad, the good creations by Ormazd, the bad creation by Ahriman. One, the continuous answer. The idea that there is a series of disasters, of cataclysm, of bad events which will characterize the collapse of a society is something which is not Iranian. Some scholars have tried to show that this was Iranian in order to establish a primary role of Iranian world with respect to Judaism and other ancient cultures. But I don't think this is true. On the other hand, Zoroastrianism had a very optimistic idea of a resurrection, although in an archaic formulation. I like to be prudent in the sense that, as I said before, immortality in many cases is eternity. But we have also to be careful that in some cases can mean just not dying. And when we speak of resurrection, we have to be careful. Is a resurrection of all the human beings? So in the early first millennium BC, people in the oasis of Central Asia were imagining a resurrection of the Chinese or the Japanese or the... we do not know. Probably not. Probably when these people speak of eternity or of nice places. This is for the Aryans, not for the rest of humanity. Is racism? Of course, all these people were racist. The Jewish were racist. The Christians in the West, the Romans were racist, and so on. So it's difficult to find universal peoples without education. So our idea of human right, of equality, of tolerance, that women and men are the same level with the same rights and so on, is a conquest. It's not something immediately existing in the mind. We are very happy when we find the light, the fire which starts to burn with these revolutionary ideas. But we have to be honestly prudent. In any case, the Zoroastrians had great ideas present in the Indo-Iranian world, because Yama and Yima belong to a common tradition, and they started to elaborate the idea of a resurrection. And then this idea of resurrection, in the meeting with other civilizations, produced new results. At the end, we have a very optimistic solution: the resurrection of all humanity and the forgiveness of all humanity. No person will be abandoned to hell. No place for Ahriman in the universe. Because if you have a place in the universe with Ahriman, Ahriman will continue to be a king, although in a very little place, but he will remain. And a universal God cannot tolerate. So my concern is that nobody in the Iranian studies has underlined the presence and importance of this doctrine. This doctrine is not a banality, is not a stupid thing. It's a very deep theological category, which has a larger framework. So in this respect, I insist, because it is not something isolated, but there is a very close connection with the heretical Christian world, in which this doctrine was attacked in a very violent way, and in certain politically interesting phases in the period of Khosrow Justinianus, these doctrines were considered socially dangerous. Why? Because they demonstrated that the access to the paradise was for everybody. Can you imagine any leading church in any country in the world saying to the criminals, well, don't worry, we will condemn you, but in any case, in the next 2,000 years, also you will join us into the paradise? If you have the power in your hand, you cannot say this. This is a very high level, is a very theological end. Recent studies have shown that even in Islam, there was a line, a theological line, with an apokatastatic perspective. So also Islam had an optimistic vision, probably connected with Iranian Zoroastrian world.
One question, if
Yes,
I'm allowed. Yeah.
please.
Antonio, probably you are the right person to ask for this issue. Is there a term in common in Iranian designating generally land of the dead? Because, for instance, several years ago, with Feridun, who is here, Ostajan Salam Arz Kardam, Feridun Bahman is here. We wrote an article dedicated to Professor Ahmad Tafazoli, to the late Professor Ahmad Tafazoli, where he tried to, when we tried to reconstruct on the basis of a term, we found in Bakhtiari morning song, recorded by Lorimer many years ago, 100 years ago. And we tried to reconstruct it, such term as in Old Iranian or in Proto-Iranian, Martra Vahana. Yeah. Is there such a term, or have you met such a designation or something a common designation of the, not Paradisa, but some, because it is just a good place. The abode of the dead.
At this moment, I don't. Nothing comes to my mind. But it's interesting to note that, for instance, Paradisa is never used in the Iranian sources for the paradise. We have to be careful.
Yes, it was just this.
Because even the Christians in Pahlavi never used Pardes for. They used the Zoroastrian terminology for the good house, the good place, but they were careful because Pardes had other
enclosed place. Yeah. But the term we suggested later turned to be a Mongolian loanword. So it was just a yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. More questions or comments? If
here,
Feridun joined us, yes.
May I wish him?
I'm here, Antonio.
Oh, Feridun,
thank you.
So
wonderful
nice.
Lecture. I enjoyed it really. Your lecture. Thank you so much.
I'm. It's a long time that we did not speak or meet or see.
Indeed. Yes, you're right.
Best wishes to your family too.
Thank you very much indeed. We often talk about you and the time you were with us.
Feridun, recently we received a visit of a daughter of Asmussen in Ravenna.
Oh, yes.
With her husband, they went to visit, and they have brought other books. So, in Ravenna, we host two important Iranological libraries. One is the library of Ilya Gershevich and his wife, Lisbeth, and another one is the library of
Asmussen. Yes.
So, just to know, because when you are in Italy, if you want a place in a little town where you can find the same things you can find in Paris, but going with a metro from one part of the other.
Exactly. It's a very good collection. Good collection. Thanks to you.
Thanks to Feridun. We still, when I mention the richness of the library of Asmussen, I have to thank Feridun Bachman, because it was him who said, Antonio, Asmussen is trying to sell his private library, and I say, block him. We buy it immediately. And
well, Antonio, but probably you do not know, but I tried also to buy this library, but unfortunately at that time we had no money here at all.
Sorry, but I robbed you practically.
Yes, we talked with Feridun about this library also. I've been in Yes's house, and he presented some books from it, from this library to me. So I have some books from your library.
Okay, fine.
Antonio, also I cherish the time we had the Congress in 2001 at Copenhagen. That was one of the pleasant events of our life, of scholarly life, with you and others.
Okay.
Yeah.
So nice. I will get your email and telephone from Garnick, and I hope we will start connecting. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Well, colleagues, friends, it's been a remarkable evening, both in terms of the fascinating lecture by Professor Panaino and in terms of the chance which gathered us all together around the subject. And I think it's a living history of Oriental studies. I'm happy we recorded it. And it's a real pleasure for me to see you all. And I hope you will join our next meetings. We already have at least 4 talks, which I announce on our site and on our FB page as well. But I will try to also email to those who are not on Facebook, announcing our further lectures. I hope we will continue them in 2022 as well. I do hope Professor Bahman will also join us and deliver any lecture on any subject you would like to.
I will be honored. I will be honored. How often do you plan to have such meetings?
Actually, we initiated such a series as a kind of celebration for the 25th anniversary of Iran and the Caucasus. Because this year we celebrate such a remarkable day.
Congratulations for that too.
Thank you very much. But we hope to continue them because many people join us from all over the world, and it's a good chance, I mean, to have a whole list of recorded lectures by outstanding scholars. It's kind of a library as well, you know, and it's always a good chance to also create and to support the atmosphere of colleagues and friends, you know, in this strange world we appear to be, you know, and we have no chance even to visit each other sometimes.
Thank you. And the last word, only two words only. I'm grateful to Antonio because Antonio is not for accepting, of course, this to lecture today on this occasion. Of course, it coincided with the sad event with the passing away of our common friend, great scholar Shaul Shaket. But still, Antonio is one of the most active members of the editorial board of Iran and the Caucasus. He writes many brilliant papers. He always takes part in any event concerning Iran and the Caucasus. So I'm grateful to you, Antonio. Thank you very much. Thank you, my dear friends, colleagues. Ostajan, kheli mamnoon. Dariusjan, kheli mamnoon. Dostan Aziz, my dear friends, Zilelin Kerner, I'm grateful to all of you for taking part in this wonderful evening talk by our common friend, Professor Antonio Panaino. Thank you.
Best
Antonio, stay. Antonio,
stay. I stay.
Yeah. So let us stay in touch, and I will announce our forthcoming lectures soon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dariush.
Thank you, Dariush.
Pleasure to have all these old friends around, and we